College of Arts and Sciences. Ma'am?
Thank you, Miss Merrill. So, our first international lecturer is an assistant professor from Prince of Songkla University, Thailand. He is an applied sociolinguist specializing in language policy and language education. His research examines language in global and local relations of power, particularly the inequalities that the cross border mobility of knowledge and people produces and perpetuates in different contexts. His work has appeared in several major journals, including Language Policy, TESOL Quarterly, ELT Journal, Current Issues in Language Planning, Journal of Multilingual and Multicultural Development and Critical Discourse Studies. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome our first lecturer, Dr. Christoph Savsky.
All right, thank you so much for that, Miss Rhea. But as of the moment, while our speaker is still preparing, let us first have a check or roll call to our participants here. So I am seeing familiar faces. Some of them are my students. And yes, thank you so much for joining us today. And we're very much excited for our first lecture, right? So I know that you'll be gaining a lot of insightful ideas from this talk. And yes, you may also take some notes, bring out your notebooks, and I'm pretty sure that you'll be learning a lot from this discussion. Okay, so can I call someone to speak out or somehow share your insights or somehow share how you're feeling right now? Okay, I will choose one from our participants. Okay, so we have here third year students, first year students, second year students, and our graduating students. Okay, so don't worry, this will be quick. Okay, I just need some of your ideas, maybe your feelings. All right. So let me call in Miss Prado. Are you there? Miss Prado, can you hear us? Okay, if you can't, I will call in another name. Okay, so let us call in. Okay, I would like to hear from our first year students. Okay, how about uy, may nag-leave. Okay, second year na lang. Okay, I am seeing Mr. Lascunia. Okay, Mr. Lascunia, can you please unmute your microphone? Okay, so I'll just ask, what are you looking forward in this discussion? Okay, what are the things that you are very much excited about? Okay, don't worry. This will be quick. Okay, Mr. Lascunia? Okay, so since you are language students, I expect that you will speak out. Okay, so just let those thoughts out. Don't worry. Okay. Walang nagsasalita so far. Ano ba? Okay, so how about from our fourth year students? Okay, my students from okay, so let's have okay, si Henley na lang. Henley, are you there?
I'm here po. Am I audible?
Yes, you're audible. All right. So, what are you most excited about, or what are you looking forward to in this discussion?
Um, Hello everyone. I'm looking forward for actually any studies or theories in research that can be helpful to my thesis po ma'am, since it's an impending task that we have to complete this sem. It's something na important jud ma'am. So anything that can be helpful to my thesis ma'am, I'm looking forward to in this seminar po ma'am, or webinar.
All right, I hear you. I can also relate because I've also been there. And yes, this will be such a great starting point when you start your manuscript writing. All right, thank you so much for listening and talking, Henley. And now I think our first lecturer, is ready to keep the ball rolling. All right, so let us call in once again Dr. Samsky.
Hey, good morning. Good morning. I'm sorry to keep you waiting for a second, yeah. But thank you very much for the invitation. And so glad to be here with you. Um, let me share my screen here. Okay. Okay, so this is the title that I've given for today. And hopefully I will give you a kind of something to think about with relation to language policy, okay? Um, Something that is very, let's say, current now also, I know in Philippines, yeah, people are talking about uh, what is the place of different languages in the curriculum, yeah? So perhaps I will give you a little bit of food for thought from that. But anyway, hello from Thailand, yeah. And let's get started, yeah. So this is kind of the outline of the talk. So I'll start by talking about language policy as action, what I mean by that, and give you a kind of general idea about what language policy is and how I'm looking at it, and how people have been looking at it in the last couple of years, and then kind of thinking about what is the next challenge for us. So I'll talk about decentering languages, which sound like a very kind of dramatic idea, but I'll explain a little bit about what that is and why that's something important for us to do. And then I'll talk about, okay, where do we go then, right? If we decenter, where do we go? I'll talk about this idea of discourse management, okay? And all of this is coming from a book that is coming out from a book of mine that's coming out next year with Cambridge University Press, that you see on the right here. Yeah, so it's kind of advertisement at the moment. So what does it mean, language policy as action? Okay. So, language policy, what does it mean? First of all, broadly, right? Is, we can look at it, what do institutions and communities do to try and establish norms related to language use? Yeah. So, very simply, language policy is always about some kind of authority. It can be the government, it can be the university, making some kind of decision about how people are going to use language. Yeah. It can also happen in the family, yeah, so there is a lot of literature looking at how families establish these kind of norms and control the way that they use language. And that kind of give us, it kind of outline a little bit the focus for us. Now, in the last kind of 20 years, we have a kind of orientation that I talk about as, action orientation, which means that we really focus on this process of what it means to do policy in different kind of context. Yeah. So, for example, people look at, in context of government, how does a government actually make decisions about language? Yeah. So, what is the process? What kind of ideas um, are coming together as part of that process? Who is listened to? Who is not listened to? All of that kind of thing. And we could say the same thing about universities. We can even bring it down to classroom level. How does the teacher in the classroom tell their students or not tell their students, what kind of language they should be using, right? Where are all those boundaries created? So we can say, looking at policy as a kind of complex sociocultural process. Yeah. So not as something just simple, that, is just a rule, right? But as something that is a lot more complex, something that can also be resisted. Yeah. In a family, it might be that the parents say, don't swear, right? And as soon as the parents are out of the room, the kids are, happily swearing with each other. Yeah. So there's also a process in which there is resistance always. Yeah, or resistance is always possible. Yeah. Um, so here, this means that you'll now find people doing language policy research, which is very empirical, so data driven. Yeah. So people doing case studies, people going to a school, right, and analyzing, okay, at this school, how does the principal, how do the teachers, how do even the students interpret, maybe policies that come from the government? How does the school create its own policies? And that sort of thing. And then, especially the important thing is how do people create agentive windows? Yeah. So this means, let's say when a policy document comes from the government to a school, how do the people in that school create space for themselves to make decisions? Yeah. Usually policy document, they give like a framework, right? But then school directors, regional educational authorities, teachers have to make a decision. Okay, what does this policy mean for me? Yeah. And that is something that we really focus on in language policy in the last sort of couple of decades. Now, so you can say there's a lot of attention now in language policy to how it's done. So how do we actually do it? Yeah, so this sociocultural process. But actually, there's been comparatively less attention on what this actually does. Yeah, so when people try to control language, right? Try to create some kind of norms of language use, that sort of thing. What is the effect of that? Yeah. So, what is actually the impact of that in society? People have talked about that in other areas of applied linguistics, but they haven't, in language policy, it's always been, oh yeah, we're, managing just language, in itself. And actually, you can look, there are some examples of people starting to think a little bit more broadly. So Elana Shohami, who is a very big name in language policy, also language testing, in 2006, talk about how language policy tries to control languaging through multimodalities. Um, so in this, there is a whole chapter where she gives examples of, okay, language in terms of, just language, so words, right? But also language as closed choice, language as food, language as all kind of things. And even eventually she comes to what about language and freedom of speech? Yeah. So, coming to the very biggest idea. Um, but this is 2006, but unfortunately, 18 years since then, that particular side of her argument didn't really get much use in language policy. Same thing, Joe LoBianco, another really big name in applied linguistics. He talked about language policy as discourse planning. So thinking about, when do we try to um, when people try to make changes in language in order to promote some kind of values in society. So, for example, promoting inclusive language when it comes to either issue of gender or ethnicity, trying to get people to stop using offensive language, that kind of thing. Yeah. And again, right, that's something that, comes from almost the same time as Shohami's idea, but not really kind of seeing that much use since then. Um, so here, there are a couple of questions that we really have to think about, kind of unanswered questions. So when we exercise authority over language, how does that reshape social relationships? Yeah. So, language in some way is just an instrument. Yeah. How does controlling language actually control people in effect, right? That's the question. And then how does taking power over language use serve other interests? Yeah. So again, right, when we try to control language, how does that let us get other interests involved? So this kind of is leading toward this idea of decentering language, right? So thinking instead of that we are just managing language in language policy, so saying um, don't use this word, don't use this language, right? Actually, we are trying to do something much broader. Yeah. So there is actually in applied linguistics quite a lot of reason to do this. Yeah. Um, there's quite a lot of literature now thinking about going beyond languages, and trying to think, thinking of languages not as just something very natural. Yeah. So, looking at, for example, the work, if you know, in multimodality, yeah, where, people try to see language as just part of everything that we use, So if you see me in the camera now, I'm using gestures, right? I'm using the colors in the PowerPoint to convey meaning, right? If we look at, any sign, that sign behind me over there, right? It uses color in a very particular way to communicate meaning, yeah. So in the end, right, there are many different ways that we communicate meaning. The other thing that people have been talking about in applied linguistics now is going away from this idea of named languages. So if any of you have been reading about the concept of translanguaging, yeah, um, translanguaging basically says, okay, there are some cases where named languages like English or Filipino or Cebuano, right, where they are important, right? But actually, there are some cases where these languages aren't important because the way that we use them ignore the boundary between them. Yeah. Um, Something that Prof. Rodney just before as I log in show by combining several different languages, yeah, and probably in that moment we're not really thinking, okay, now he's using all of these. Maybe he's thinking about that, maybe not, yeah. But very often, if we can speak multiple languages, our ability is we can use them very flexibly, yeah, and without thinking, okay, now I'm going to go from English to French to Italian. Yeah, actually, we're kind of doing it a lot more flexibly than that. So this is quite a significant challenge for language policy because, the history of this field and also just its existence is kind of really entangled with this idea of languages, right, as having kind of very clear defined border. Yeah, that's where the field started. So, the start of language policy as a field is um, going to doing what we call nation building. So, in the early kind of 1960s, right, there are nations around the world who become independent as the colonial empires start to fall apart, right? And basically, the language policy kind of started as, okay, let's go as applied linguists to these nations and solve their problem. Yeah. And very often at that time, solving the problem was, kind of people from very European perspective coming in to, African countries where there are hundreds of languages being spoken and basically saying, this is too messy, you have too many languages, we have to kind of simplify so that you can function as a nation. Yeah. We have to choose one national language, right? Or we have to choose, or you have to use English, and you have to, build your whole nation around that. You have to build your whole education around that. Yeah. Um, and of course, this is still kind of an unsolved issue even now in the Philippines. Yes, still big debate about which languages um, should be what should be the place of different languages in the identity. Yeah, and what you can see here in the slide, right, is this term language management. So this was the idea at the time that, okay, language policy is about controlling languages. I would like to think about language policy in a slightly different way. Yeah. So here, thinking about it as metapragmatic discourse, which is, to put it simply, it's discourse about discourse. Yeah. So when we talk about talking, yeah. So, or language about language. Yeah. So when we're talking about our own language use, that is what language policy really is, right? It's saying something about the way that we use language and giving it some kind of social meaning. So, thinking about the idea of what is what is English and what is not English. Yeah, big debate in area of world Englishes, right? Very historical debate. What is proper English and what is a kind of deficient English. Yeah, and from Southeast Asian perspective, that's still a very current debate. Yeah, because still we have international tests which position the English of people from Southeast Asia as somehow wrong, right? Because the tests are based on British English, American English. Yeah. Um, it's also about which forms are seen as languages rather than dialects. Yeah, my good friend Ruani Tupas always brings up this argument in the context of Philippines, where people are used to saying, that regional languages are actually dialects, not languages. Yeah, Rouhani always says, well, no, they're languages, yeah, and pointing out that this is really important, that they are equal to others, right, rather than being sort of less. And of course, the idea of what is seen as correct, and also who is legitimate speaker of a language, who is the legitimate speaker of English, yeah, that's really a very fundamental question that is to do with also language policy. So the way that I would sort of understand language policy as giving you this convoluted definition here, but basically it's about controlling discourse. So controlling how we use language, yeah, and how we show ourselves when we use language, and how others show themselves, yeah. That's where language policy really does the most work, yeah. Um, so that is, a kind of big issue for us. Yeah. So it's some kind of boundaries, yeah, intervention in practice, in use of language, yeah, and sort of controlling basically, what resources we can use to make meaning, yeah, what kind of language we can use to make meaning. If we say don't swear, right, it's basically saying, okay, don't use that little part of your language to make meaning when you express yourself. Yeah. But if we say speak only English, right, that's excluding for many people a very big part of their repertoire, right, and limiting them to just one part and limiting how they can participate in discourse. So part of this we can talk about, okay, this helps to manage knowledge, yeah, or it's a function of this is managing knowledge. So who is legitimate in discourse? Who is positioned as knowledgeable according to what language can be used? And this is something that people in language policy have talked about quite a lot. So, traditionally, right, the idea of policy was, okay, the government creates policy and then everyone else follows it. Yeah. Nowadays, the big focus is on how do people at different levels, yeah. So you can imagine like a big pyramid, yeah. How do people at different levels understand and implement policy? Yeah. So how do people at the district level, when they get the policy from the government, how do they interpret it? Yeah. How does the school director interpret it? And actually, when you research this, you find that people really do use a lot of knowledge in when they get involved in language policy, yeah, that they really do, including teachers, right? That when they make decisions about what to do in their classroom, they are knowledgeable. So language policy recently um, has tried to sort of capture this, yeah. But of course, the effect of language policy is often that people might be seen as not knowledgeable, yeah. So so one of the things that you can think about, yeah, is when in hiring policy, yeah, when schools decide who they are going to hire, often in places where there are many possible candidates, right? They might choose on the basis of some criteria in language. So that is a kind of language policy, right? But of course, the way that they use that might not necessarily be very positive. Yeah. So we can think about whose language is seen as knowledgeable, and then who is positioned as having ownership over language, whose identity is validated or invalidated through language policy. So, if you look at this advertisement on the right, yeah, this is an advertisement that I collected as part of my research on teacher migration in Thailand. Yeah. So to give you a little bit of context, in Thailand, we have quite a big number of teachers from other countries, including me, of course. Yeah. But I'm here talking more about, in particular, about at schools. Yeah. Including many from the Philippines. Yeah. At my daughter's school, for example. Yeah. And the what you can see in this advertisement is that they are kind of they are the way that the work is being advertised is actually quite discriminatory. Yeah. So you see the way that they define non-native. Yeah. Is, they say European, South Africans, and South American, not Asian or African. Yeah. But South American is okay, as mentioned above. Yeah. So what are they saying? Yeah. They are saying they want, white skin. Yeah. And unfortunately, we can look at this as a kind of language policy, right? It's sort of trying to use language, trying to use this idea of, okay, who is a native speaker, who is a non-native speaker, right? They're trying to abuse that actually to discriminate, yeah? To discriminate not on the basis of who is more qualified as a teacher, who has more experience, who has more ability, yeah? But on the basis of what passport do you have, what your skin color is. Yeah. Unfortunately, sad reality, yeah, of um, of language policy or of language policy in also around the world. Yeah. Another way that we can look at language policy is, through what identity is visible. Yeah. Um, so who can be seen when we see when we look at discourse? Yeah, whose identity is actually is actually sort of obvious to us. So if you think about what we can see in what we call linguistic landscape, if you've studied about that before, yeah. So linguistic landscape is, the signs that we can see in a public space, right? Very often language policy sort of plays a role in controlling, right, who can be seen through those signs, whose identities can be seen through those signs. Yeah. So there might be a law saying, okay, you cannot show this language, you must show only one language, or if you have more than one language, this one must be more visible, that kind of thing. Yeah. So there might be a law saying that, if you have too much of English, for example, you have to pay like a fine. Yeah. So there are these kind of laws. Um, so just as an example, the sign that you can see here, this is from my city in Thailand, Hat Yai. Yeah. So the language that you see represented here in terms of the script choice is Thai. Yeah. So this is Thai script, but actually the writing system is used to represent Chinese. Yeah. And the colors and the symbolism of everything in this sign is used to represent Chinese identity. So this is going back to the history of this city, which is at its origins a Chinese city, yeah, or let's say city started by Chinese at the very earliest point in history, yeah. But of course, it's after a quite long history of suppression of Chinese identity that basically the way that we see this identity is kind of in the background, yeah. We see Thai letters and we think, okay, Thai language, right? But actually the Thai letters are used to represent the Chinese language, and the colors are there to represent the Chinese identity. But the language policy kind of, create a kind of distinction between these two. Anyway, Paolo will tell you a lot more about linguistic landscape, I'm sure. So, thinking about that, so this is how we can kind of broaden language policy. And I'll finish within a few minutes. Yeah. So, on the one hand, of course, we can think about who is treated as legitimate in discourse, right? So who is treated as having knowledge. We can think about how the relationships between people are managed. Yeah. we can think about what kind of identities are visible. And of course, language policy in the end is also about access. Yeah. Think about when we need to take a language test before we can go to university, but of course also before we can move to a particular country. Yeah. Very often, even in Thailand, I have to do a language test for English to be able to work here every 2 years. Yeah. Um, so in the end, it's a kind of in the end, it's a use, right? Language policy is used to also control what we do. So when we decenter languages, we can think about recentering action. Yeah. So recentering action and thinking about what do people do when they do language policy. Yeah. So obviously we have to think about languages, but we have to also think about broader consequences. Yeah. So we have to think about how do we intervene in not just in language when we do language policy, but in languaging, so in discourse, right, in the way that we use language, and also in the way that we live as a society, right? How do we reorder social relationships through that? Yeah. So how do we use language really to control society? Yeah. How do we use how do we intervene to kind of also in sort of broader ways in language? Okay, so I think that's enough. Yeah, so let's say as a final point, right, it's about humanizing language and humanizing the way that we control language as well. So I'll leave you with this picture of my faculties so you can think about idea of where I am right now. Okay, so thank you very much. And yeah, if you have any question, I'm happy to talk to you.
All right. Thank you so much for that enlightening talk on language policy in action towards a focus on discourse management, Dr. Savsky. Definitely, your insights provided us with profound understanding of the critical role language policies and underscore the importance of their thoughtful design in shaping meaningful discourse. All right. I know that Dr. Savsky's talk about this topic has really ignited something within you, right, students? So at this point, we would like to encourage everyone to please ask questions. You may raise your hand or you may just type your questions in our chat box. Okay, we will be assigning our staff to gather your questions and we will be entertaining at least three for our open forum. All right. So I guess we already have some questions on our chat box. I know that Dr. Savsky is now ready to address all of them. So our first question is from, okay, I think it is from a second year student. Yeah, is it Mr. or Miss Cagnio? Okay, so the question would be, what is your stance? Okay, so again, what is your stance between language standardization, that is, the use of a dominant language as an official and natural use of natural cohesion and common agreement grounds, versus linguistic diversity and all the many manifests of inclusive forms of languages, non dominant or not? Do you think language policy caters to these two priorities simultaneously? Okay, so you can
Yeah,
grab.
thank you.
Yeah.
What a great question. Yeah. I think this is it's a really big question now in applied linguistics in general. Yeah. And also big debate in many societies, this idea of, is it better to have, focus on, yeah, like one sort of coherent language, or, can we have kind of fluidity? Yeah. Can we just, have, uh, diversity? Yeah. Actually, probably the what we see here is a kind of false opposite. Yeah. I don't know. I guess I'm not too radical in this sense. I do think that where if we have, um, certain kinds of language use, we're always going to have standardization. Yeah. And we're going to have some kind of regulated language. You know, I kind of tend to think that the nature of academic language is quite regulated. Yeah, certain kind of legal language, official language, in the end, they are quite regulated forms. Um, and I think that, that's something that also in education, right? It's something that we do sort of aim for. Yeah. We do need citizens with literacy. Yeah. In that kind of language to a certain degree. But I think it's kind of wrong to think that we have to choose. Yeah. That if we want that kind of literacy, then that means we have to have an education system which only focuses on that. Yeah. And that we have to have, for example, I don't know, TV that only shows that, which is what you find, the belief that you find in some contexts around the world is, well, you can't have dialect on TV, right? That what will people think? They will think that they can use any language that they want. Yeah. Which I think that's a very problematic way of thinking. Yeah. It means that, we have this sort of natural diversity that we have in every society, right? Every society is diverse, multilingual, right? But somehow we think that what we have to do is suppress that multilingualism. Yeah. So I think we can, language policy should, to sort of answer the question, it should find a way to cater to that. Yeah. I think it's possible to teach, and this is something that I try to promote also in my own teaching. Yeah. It's possible to teach even academic writing, but at the same time have awareness of diversity. Yeah. So you can teach even the most regulated form, how to do a reference in APA style, right? But you can still also around that, right? There is always diversity, yeah, and it's something that we have to try and also then translate into policy. How to even when we have standardized form, how to allow for diversity around them at the same time. Yeah, but big challenge and a great question. Yeah. Should I continue with the next question because there are some good questions here as well? Yeah. Um, I can read them myself. It's okay. Yeah, Marilyn. Yeah. Uh, Her question, how can ethnographic case studies show different communities create and apply language policies while respecting and preserving their culture? Well, I mean, it's a question of when you go to these communities, and this is something that you can ask Paolo about later. He's something that I know that he's done, yeah, is you can go to communities and look at, how do they create windows in language policies, yeah. Even the policies that we saw before, which are kind of very sort of rigidly promoting standard language, right? Actually, even around those, you will often find people in local communities, in minority communities, creating windows around them, right? Trying to promote diversity, yeah. So here is where the kind of resistance can come in. Yeah. And when I say resistance, don't think of it as, going out and protesting or whatever. Yeah. It can be just very silent form of resistance. Yeah. So, but the ethnographic studies are really good because when you spend time in the community, you would really see that kind of thing happening. Yeah. Even when it's completely unsaid. Yeah. That, you just sort of see, for example, something at a school, a sign in a language which is not supposed to be official in that context. Yeah, we can already say that it's kind of that it's kind of yeah, that it's, let's say, a question of resistance a little bit. Yeah. Okay, then Krista is asking about challenges challenges of teaching this subject. Well, um, challenges is how can I say? Well, it's always a challenge raising awareness, yeah, because education tends to foreground standard forms, as I said before, yeah. So you're always trying to talk about diversity, but really, I think the interesting challenge to me has always been humanizing language. Yeah. I think we kind of people in also in my case, when I went through school, language was grammar, punctuation, literature. Yeah. It's not really language is not seen as something, is not taught as something that is, belong to us humans. Yeah. And that also like is really closely connected to our expression of who we are and this kind of thing. So that's probably the big challenge for me. Um, how are we doing with time? Should I
Oh, it's okay, Dr. Savsky. We can still cater, I think, at least 3 questions. We have a lot
okay,
here.
I'll take another maybe one or two, yeah? And
Okay,
then me maybe leave the rest, yeah? Maybe Paulo. I'm sure Paulo will be
right.
happy to talk about some of these too. Um, oh, someone asking about how can we use language policies to support translanguaging practices? Ah, good question, yeah? Um, give power to teachers, yeah? Partly. Um, translanguaging partly is so for example, right, translanguaging would be if you are in any classroom, right, kind of softening the boundary of a language. So not saying you must use English, uh, you must use Filipino, you must use whatever language, right? But sort of being flexible. But really, the main thing there is also doing, or finding, I mean, obviously having dialogue with policymakers is important, yeah. But especially this is something that can happen at the local level, where you can have school authorities, where you can have also individual teachers, right, and sort of educate them how to cross boundaries. Yeah, that's really and what are the productive activities that we can do in teaching, for example, to kind of yeah, be flexible, let's say. Yeah. Okay. All right. I'll do one more last one because this one is interesting from Philip about native speakerism. Yeah. Um, uh, well, I mean, at my faculty, so this is asking, how do what are we doing? Yeah. I mean, I've been, at every opportunity, yeah, trying to raise this. And really, I mean, in the university scene in Thailand is there are cases where, it's discriminatory, yeah, where there is native speakerism going on. But the Thai universities have been pretty good at embracing the idea of world Englishes, global Englishes. Most graduate programs here will have a course in that area. The problem really is at schools, yeah, and especially school managers, directors, owners who perceive that they can make a greater profit through uh, hiring native speaker teachers. Yeah, that somehow that gives their programs a premium. This is coming from one of my uh, MA student, Luke Comprendio, when he actually talked to the parents were sort of quite critical, thinking, well, I'd rather have a qualified teacher from Asia than, a guy from the UK who used to drive a truck. Yeah. When he asked the students are very open-minded. I mean, my daughter, to her, it doesn't make any difference whether her teacher is from Manila or London. Yeah. She's can connect with anyone. Yeah. It seems to be really a problem of education as a business. Yeah, that's the impression there. So there is a kind of critical thinking about this, but really it's about intervening in the business side of it. Yeah, yeah. But still, it's a long process, as you can imagine. Okay, I'm gonna leave it there. I think I have taken enough time. Yeah. But thank you for
Yes,
all
thank you
these
so much,
questions.
Dr. Savsky, for addressing some of the questions. I know that there's still a lot more thought-provoking questions here, but don't worry, we'll try to address them later on. We'll be taking note of all of them. And actually, I think you can also send Dr. Savsky an email. Okay, if he permits. Yeah, you can send him directly an email about your questions. And yeah, we'll be taking note of all these things here. Okay, so at this juncture, we'll now be presenting our certificate of appreciation or recognition to our dear speaker. Okay, in acknowledgement of Okay. Of sincere appreciation for gracing our webinar with profound and enlightening discussion, this certificate of appreciation or recognition is hereby given to Dr. Christoph Samsky for imparting his scholarly insights as a speaker in the first Ilmu International Lecture Series on applied linguistics with a topic entitled Language Policy and Action towards a focus on discourse management on this fifth day of September 2024 at 8 a.m. Philippine Standard Time via Zoom. Okay, so that is our certificate. And thank you so much, Dr. Samsky, and to our participants. Okay, so before we move to our next speaker, let us have first a quick icebreaker. Okay, that I know that some of you are somehow sleepy, right? So let's call in some of our language students, okay, just to loosen up a bit. So they'll help us break down barriers and get us all in the right headspace. Okay, so I think Darlene, yeah, Darlene, you may now take the floor.
So, hello everyone. Welcome to our exciting icebreaker game, Four Picks, One Name. So, here's how it works. So, we will show you four pictures related to a famous linguist, and your task is to guess the name of the linguist using the jumbled letters that link the pictures together. We will display a set of four pictures and scramble the letters of the linguist's name. And a participant will be chosen to guess the name within 10 to 15 seconds. And if you think you know the answer, you can just simply raise your hand or feel free to type your answer in the chat box. So please do not search for answers online. This is all about having fun and challenging your brain. So don't worry if you don't get it right. Just enjoy the game and the guessing. So let's get started. So for our first four pictures. So all right, who thinks they know the name of the linguist from these pictures? So you will have 10 to 15 seconds. So you just all right. Thank you so much, Um, Mr. Lester B. Argawanon. So yes, the correct answer is Mr. Noam Chomsky. And next up, we have the second set of pictures. So let's see who can guess this one. All right, thank you so much from Baelol 3, Miss Lovitos. So the answer one is, all right, Mr. Stephen Krushen. And down to our final linguist is all right, you can just put your answers in our chat box for this one. All right, again from Baelo 3, Miss Octal, Mr. Robin Lakoff. So thank you very much for playing Four Picks One Name, and I hope you had fun and learned something new. And we're about to dive into our next game, into a fun and brain teasing activity where your linguistics knowledge will shine. And again, the same with our first game, you'll see a set of four pictures, and these pictures are linked to a specific linguistic term. You can guess the term by unscrambling the jumbled letters associated with the pictures. So again, participants can just simply put your answers in the chat box or raise your hand. And now let's get started with our last game. So for the round one, so what's the term that connects these four pictures? All right. So the answer for this one is phonetics. For round two, let's have the next set of pictures. So here's our next challenge. So what's the term that linked to these images? All right, Miss Nice Tube One is these pictures represent. So, right, for this picture, the answer is everyone. So thank you for playing Four Picks One Word. I hope that you had a great time, enjoyed testing your linguistic knowledge, and remember, it's all about having fun and learning. So sit back, relax, and enjoy the rest of our webinar.
All right, thank you so much, Miss Lames, for that very engaging icebreaker. Okay, I guess our participants and also our next speaker is very much ready to get started with our next topic. So, without further ado, let us proceed now to our next discussion. Okay, to introduce our next speaker, may we call in Mr. Philip Andrew Garlitos, a language faculty member of the USEP College of Arts and Sciences. Sir?
Thank you, Miss Merrill. Maayong buntag. It is my honor to introduce to you the second international lecturer this morning. Our second international lecturer holds an MA degree from the University of Exeter and PhD from the University of Bristol. He was born in Milan, Italy, and worked at the University of Brunei before moving to Malaysia in 2010 to join the University of Malaya. His research focuses on endangered languages, language planning, linguistic landscapes, new speakerhood, and nationalism. Recently, he has explored the practical uses of Tokipona and other constructed languages. He has published in various journals, including Language Problems and Language Planning, Journal of Multilingual and Multicultural Development, and International Journal of Multilingualism. His book, Minority Language Planning and Micronationalism in Italy, was published in 2007 by Peter Lang. Ladies and gentlemen, our second lecturer, Associate Professor Dr. Paolo Colucci.
Good morning. Can you hear me? Can you see me?
I can hear you clearly, sir.
Okay. So may I start? Yeah. Can I start? All right. I can see myself now. Let me. Okay. Right. If you can hear me well, I'll start. It's a bit earlier than planned, than scheduled, but maybe I might have a little bit more time to talk. I don't know whether I have to stick to the 25 minutes or can speak a little bit more. But you stop me. I mean, you tell me when, because I got quite a lot of material and okay. So let's talk a little bit about the linguistic landscape, one of my research areas, about which I have published well, relatively a lot. I think 11 articles to date. Anyway, I don't think I have to go through too much through definition. You know more or less what the linguistic landscape is. Basically, is writings and symbols in the public space. Just to make it very, very simple. The discipline basically started with Landry and Borges' seminal paper in 1997. There had been some research before dealing with writings in the public space, but it wasn't really called linguistic landscape. Just a few articles here and there. But Landry and Borges defined the field for the first time. I must say that after their article for about 10 years, the field didn't take off really. There were a few articles after this seminal paper, but I think it was starting from Thenoth and Cortes actually it was a special issue of International Journal of Multilingualism. But it became like a book. I bought it as a book, and that came out in 2006. And it was from that moment, I think, that really the field started taking off. After this little booklet, yeah, more and more articles started to be written on the linguistic landscape. Not so many at the beginning. I remember in the first few years, I could read everything that came out on the linguistic landscape. Now it's virtually impossible. There are thousands of articles available that had been written and published on the linguistic landscape. And I remember I got this this book, and I was fascinated. I found it so interesting, and I thought I had to to start myself. I was in Brunei at the time, and I basically started researching and writing my first article, which came out in the end in 2009. So what I would like to do in the time I have, maybe is to show you a little bit the evolution in the field of linguistic landscape through my own articles. I think that yeah, by showing my articles, I can also give you a little bit of background just to give you an idea how the idea of the article came up, and at the same time, because more or less my articles, to an extent at least, reflect a little bit the evolution of the field. So I think it might be interesting to hear. It might be a little bit ambitious in such a short time, but I'll try my best. I've selected some of my articles. I don't know if I can go through all of them, but I'll do my best. So I'll start sharing my first article, and then I'll give you a background. As I said, it came out 2009. Let me see, share screen if I can do it. Okay, I think one should be this one. Okay, can you all see it? Did I do the correct thing? I don't use Zoom so much. Can you all see the article?
Yes, sir. We can see it clearly.
Okay, great. So I scroll through and just stop in wherever I want to, say something, explain something. Okay, so that was, even though I was in Brunei, I really wanted to write something to start off with, something about my own country, about Italy. This was partly, or maybe mainly, because a famous Italian scholar had written an article where he claimed that Italian the regional languages, which are normally referred to as dialects, were visible, very visible in the linguistic landscape. It really sounded strange to me because I travel a lot in Italy, my own country, and the local languages are basically invisible. So anyway, his method, I mean, basically what he did was just going through the yellow pages. There was no internet that time. Yeah, there was internet, but not as much as sophisticated as today. And he realized that there were a lot of restaurants in his city, Turin, northwest Italy, and surrounding. A lot of restaurants he found with a name in the local language, which is called Piedmontese, quite different from Italian. But he didn't really. He gave quite a lot of examples, but he didn't give any data like how many restaurants in total. What is more or less the percentage of restaurants with the name in the local language? And but he admitted it was very anecdotal. But the problem was that other scholars, after this article, started quoting him and saying Italian dialects, regional languages are very visible in the linguistic landscape. So that was wrong, basically. But I didn't have any proof, so I said I have to find out myself. So I decided to research the linguistic landscape. And I selected two cities, my own, Milan, which is not too distant from Turin, and then Udine. Udine is in northeast Italy, actually. I chose Udine because I had carried out research for my PhD there, so I knew the place. And what was interesting is that Milan has got a regional language being spoken not so much any longer, called Lombardo, and with a Milanese variety in Milan, Milanese. And the Udine, they speak, I mean, a percentage, not very high percentage of the population speak Friulian, which is actually recognized as a minority language, unlike Milanese or like Lombard. So basically, I follow Thanos and Gorter's methodology. I chose one street in the center, one street in Milan, one street in Udine, two streets of similar length. I mean, not really central, but near the center, I decided, because I thought that maybe if they were too central, they would be influenced by tourist demand, maybe more English. So I chose something central, but not touristic areas. And I went around photographing, taking pictures of all the signs. Okay, I'll just show you quickly the results of this research. Okay, here. As you can see here, this is Milan, this is Udine. By the way, Udine, I wrote it in a local language, Udine in Italian. So can you see here, Italian dominates very clearly. So units of analysis, I use the concept unit of analysis that Thanos and Gortes used. Units of analysis in Italian only was in Milan 76%, even more in Udine 86%. So this means basically shops in most of the cases, all in Italian, no other language appearing. And whereas the units containing another language with or without Italian, 24% in Milan, 14%. However, if I show you a breakdown of the languages I found, it was mostly English. The local language, the second place here, Milanese in the case of Milan, Friuli in the case of Udine, were hardly noticeable. I mean, more in 16% in Udine, but remember, in Udine, it is a recognized minority language. Actually, it's surprising. I was surprised it was so little, only 60% being kind of co-official. In Milanese, almost nothing. I was actually quite lucky to find one sticker in the Milanese in one shop. Yeah, so basically, what the professor I mentioned before had written was not really true. I mean, of course, it was true that he found these names in the yellow pages, but obviously the percentage must have been very small compared with the high number of restaurants in the province. Right. Yeah, I'll just show you quickly the pictures of the local languages. By the way, minority language is one of my interests. And that's why I focused on these two regional and minority languages. So here it was in Milan. This is Milanese, se parla anche il Milanese, which means Milanese is spoken as well. In Italian would be, actually in this case, not too different from Italian. Si parla anche il Milanese. That would be Italian. This is in Udine. Similarly, this is a sticker on a shop that says "Io feveli furlan," which means I speak Friulian. As you can see, like in Italian would be "Io parlo friulano," so that's quite different. That's again in Friuli, and this is the name of the street in Friuli. This is just the examples of the local language. Okay, that's all. Let me move on to the next. Yeah, this is very important before I forget. Okay, so basically, this is an example of the first phase. I broadly divided let's say, the history of the linguistic landscape research in four main periods. It's a bit subjective, and I'm simplifying a lot, of course, but in the first period, at the last, during the first, I don't know, maybe 4 or 5 years, most of the articles were very quantitative, like this one. I mean, we would just take pictures and then analyze them. So my first three articles actually reflected this. Next article as well. I just go briefly through it. Let me close this one. Close current tab. And okay, is it? Yeah. Okay. The beginning. Okay. This is my second article. Second or third, because there is also one chapter in a edited book, which I'm not going to talk about, but including my research in Brunei. I was in Brunei, and after my first article about Italy, I decided, of course, I'm in Brunei. I have to write something about Brunei. No previous research had been carried out about linguistic landscape in Brunei, so it was time to start. As you can see here, the title is The Linguistic Landscape of Brunei Darussalam, Minority Languages, and the Threshold of Literacy. I introduced this concept, this idea of a threshold of literacy. I will explain briefly in a second. So I just go straight. The methodology was the same as the one I used for the previous article, but in this case, I choose one street in Bandar Seri Begawan, the capital, small capital of Brunei Darussalam. And I go to okay, just a few pictures, and then I'll show you the table. Okay, as you can notice here, there are two scripts, and most units of analysis have got these two languages, and you will see in a second and more. Anyway, the first one is not Arabic, but it's Jawi. It's Arabic script, actually, but used for Malay. That was the traditional way of writing Malay. In Brunei Darussalam, it is compulsory. All shops, everywhere, Jawi must be used. So in this case too, it's English and Malay written in Jawi. Okay, anyway, let's not. Okay, this is another interesting, even though it's compulsory, sometimes official notices don't have Jawi, but not many of them. This one has only got Malay in Rumi, Italian Morocco, and then English. As you can see, Malay is dominant on the top and the bigger side. Okay, here just some tables before I move on to other pictures. So can you see for the first table 2 here? Okay, standard Malay appears in 62% of all units of analysis. English, actually, a little bit more. This is very interesting because English is not official in Malay, but it's really widespread. Okay, Brunei was a former protectorate, British protectorate, but this is very interesting. It's similar in a way to Malaysia, where where I now reside. In the capital, there were quite a few. The only minority language I could see in the linguistic landscape was Chinese, because 19%. There is a Chinese minority in Brunei, and they own quite a lot of shop. Anyway, nowadays this percentage would be lower because a law came out that basically prohibited the display of Chinese. But I mean, not immediately. I mean, the idea was, Chinese was going to be phased out. When a Chinese sign was too old, they would be replaced with Malay. Not very good, but okay. Here in this in table 3, I just also analyzed the use of Jawi. Not analyzed, but counted. So basically, it's the same as Malay written in Roman script in Rumi. So Jawi, of course, Malay. Yeah? The same. Not. It doesn't mean that all signs have both, but some sign, most of them have both. But some signs had only Jawi. A few signs had only Jawi. A few only Malay. Again, English is really prevalent, and then Chinese. Okay. Anyway, that's. I'll just show you a few more pictures. This is another case, Jawi on top, but then Rumi, so both Malay and then English. Okay, stop there. There are other tables, but yeah, and this is another one. This is Pizza Hut. It's interesting because they translated the meaning. Here, it's not just the sound in Jawi, but it's Pondok Pizza. Pondok is a hut in Malay. Okay, this is another one. This includes Chinese. It's a Chinese shop, but Jawi must be there, and then also Rumi, and another one similar way. But of course, as you can see, Malay or Jawi or Rumi is always dominant. Okay, I'll just briefly show you this idea. This is another sign. Okay, of the threshold of literacy I mentioned before, just briefly. This is a table of the linguistic repertoire of Brunei, basically the languages that are used in Brunei. Yeah? So can you see here? I divided them into top down and bottom up, referring to the signs. Top down from the government, bottom up, I said the people. So these are the languages used basically in science made by the government, and this in science and private science, basically. It is interesting, they're different languages, but the only language really that is in common is English. Can you see English is here, English is there? Because sorry, I mentioned so the linguistic landscape. Not the linguistic landscape in this case, but just the language is used by the people. Because of course, in the linguistic landscape, Malay is used both in top down and bottom up science. But the point here is that English is used both top down and bottom up, and whereas Malay. Standard Malay is used by the government, whereas people don't really speak Standard Malay. They speak a local dialect. Okay, here is the threshold of literacy. So this is a line, meaning that beyond this line, the languages are not used in the linguistic landscape because they are not written down. So Brunei Malay is the local dialect, and then minority languages, apart from Chinese. Okay, that's all as far as this article is concerned. Now let's move on with the next one. Sorry, let me. I have to plug my computer because I can. 1 second. Okay, sorry. It was didn't realize The battery was not charged fully. Okay, now it should be okay. All right. Now, next article. Okay, so this was basically the first two articles I shown you reflected. Oh, I have to hurry a little bit. Reflected the first phase, just more quantitative, just taking picture of the site. But after that, it became common and quite important to add a kind of qualitative, anyway, part. Basically, interviews or short surveys carried out among either the owners of the shop or the public, the users. And this is reflected in my next article here. Sorry, let me, which is the languages of places of worship in the Kuala Lumpur. I was already in. I had moved from Brunei to Malaysia. So I wrote this article. This time it was also a bit different. I didn't go through the streets of Kuala Lumpur or Petaling Jaya where I live, but I targeted places of worship. There are many of them in Malaysia. That's one interesting thing about Malaysia. But what is interesting also that according to law, also in Malaysia, Malay has to be to appear on the signs, whereas yeah, within places of worship, that's even though places of worship sort of public places, but this law doesn't apply. So inside places of worship, you can really see what the prestige of the different languages. Of course, it depends on the place of worship. But anyway, just going quickly through this about the various religions in this introduction, religions in Malaysia. But let me move on. So basically, there were like three parts of this research. I carried out interviews with people knowledgeable about the places of worship. By the way, I chose six. Let me double check. Yeah, six places of worship, different places of worship. I'll show you in a second which ones. And the first phase, okay, languages in spoken form. Basically, as I was saying, interviewed the knowledgeable people. I also observed a little bit myself. These are the six places of worship: a mosque, Gurdwara is a Sikh temple, two Christian churches, but different denomination, Catholic and Anglican, Chinese temple, Hindu temple, and the Buddhist temple, Thai Buddhist temple, but where many Chinese go and worship. Well, worship, I don't know if I can use that word for Buddhism, but anyway, so here I wrote the ethnic groups of the believers, the languages used during functions and ceremonies, and the languages used informally within the compound. But I skipped this because I want to focus on the linguistic landscape. So in the next tables, you can see the results of the languages I found in different places of worship. Starting quickly with the mosque, I just go look at the total. Can you see the common language is Malay. There is 15% some Arabic, the sacred language of Islam, but the same for English, interestingly. Okay, this is an example. Okay, this is the Gurdwara, the Sikh temple. The Sikh people traditionally speak Punjabi, but Punjabi is less than English. English is really taken over, even among the Sikh community. Example. This is the Catholic Church. English, 83%, really the majority. Then there's a little bit of Malay and tiny bit of Chinese and Tamil. This is also, I was thinking at the beginning, it's interesting. Catholic Church, why isn't it in Italian? I thought, isn't Italian the language of Rome, the Pope? Not, of course not. It's English. English is the international language. It's a very prestigious language, as you know. But I don't need to add anything. Okay, this is the Anglican Church. English prevails, but a little bit less. More Malay, Tamil, and Chinese. So it seemed as if the Anglican Church was a little bit more multilingual. Then we have the Chinese temple. Chinese temple is 75% Chinese, so very Chinese, but also some English, almost 20%, just a tiny bit of Malay. This is the Hindu temple. English prevails again, and then there's Tamil. Also Tamil written in Roman characters. But the majority is if you put Tamil in Tamil script, then Roman characters a little bit more, but more or less the same. And finally, the Buddhist temple, the Thai Buddhist temple, Chetawa, it looks quite multilingual, but again, English prevails. It's the majority, but also there's Malay, some Thai, not much to be a Thai temple, but Chinese, a little bit of Thai. Okay, but okay? So far, so good. This was the I went into these places of worship. I took pictures of all the writings I saw. However, I had to write to add something more, a little bit more qualitative, let's say, yeah. Even though it's sort of quantitative here, but basically the opinion of the believers, which was not very easy. Going into a place of worship and asking people, it's not so. Of course, I wouldn't interrupt. I didn't go into the praying halls or whatever. It was just outside in the compound. But I managed to find 10 people for each place of worship. Basically, okay, this is the title. Basically, what I asked them, a very simple question. I didn't want to take much of that time, but I asked them whether, I gave an introduction. I told them, look, in this place, for instance, let's take the mosque. These 3 languages appear in the linguistic landscape. English, quite a lot of Malay, as you can see around, and Arabic. Arabic, English, more or less the same. I introduced the situation first to the people because they might not be aware. And I simply asked them, do you think these 3 languages should appear more? There should be more signs in that language? So same, is it okay like that? There should be more or there should be less? Okay, I won't go through all this, but just the total of English and Malay, which is interesting. So for English, so 60 people, 10 for each place of worship. For English, 49%, 49 people were happy with the situation. 19 said there should be more English and only 2 less English. Look at Malay, yeah? So more or less same as English, 48, the same. It's okay like this. But the number of people who wanted more and those who wanted less were the same. So this shows you something about the prestige of these languages. Yeah. So my conclusion basically is that in Malaysia, English is in general more prestigious than Malay, the national language. Okay, I'm simplified. I'm going quickly through because the time is running. Okay, if I could go on just a little bit more, I will. Okay, so this is an example of this. Let's say the second phase where a qualitative element, some interview or something had to be inserted, as I did. The next article, but I will just skip it because there's no time, but I'll just show you. This was a research on Italian minor language in the linguistic landscape of Kuala Lumpur. I targeted a big shopping mall, pavilion in Bukit Bintang. And I realized that because I had realized before there was a lot of Italian around, and I was wondering why Italian? Why Italian, Malaysia? Nobody speaks Italian. What was very interesting, as I said, I found a lot of shops. I won't go through the tables because we don't have time, but I found a lot of shops with Italian. Most of them were actually Italian brands, but there were also some international brands using Malay, and then a lot of local brands, local Malaysian or maybe Singaporean shops used Italian as well. Of course, most of them was for restaurants, basically Italian restaurants, which makes sense, right? Italian restaurants. However, I found some shops not related to food or fashion, that used Italian as well. And that I found really, really interesting. Okay, this is an example. Palazzo PJ, this is a club. Okay, this is actually two examples. One example outside the pavilion, but just quickly, very, very quickly. Variante, this a clothes shop, and using Italian. Oh, this one, Casa Mia. That was really interesting, and I tried to find the reason to understand why. I interviewed people that were coming out from these shops, 20 people, I think, but basically most of them didn't even know it was Italian, or they didn't enter the shop because they saw Italian on. But apparently, I managed to interview two owners, and apparently Italian is felt as a very exotic language. That's why it's being used. Why Italian and not French or Spanish, etc.? That's difficult to tell. Maybe because of the British background of Malaysia, because in the English speaking world, Italian is quite prestigious. For historical, I would say, artistic reasons, maybe because of that. But that I'm not so sure. That was my conclusion here. But anyway, I said I would just go very quickly through this. Okay, next one. Okay, as I said, I interviewed 20 people. So there was, again, this element of interviewing, not only taking pictures of the shops. Okay, the next one, but I go through it very, very quickly, actually, because I would like to, the last few minutes, say a little bit more about last article I had selected. This is about Jawi, the Arabic script. I call it an endangered orthography in the Malaysian linguistic landscape because it's being used less and less. Rumi has taken over. In this case, this is maybe I could call it another phase, successive phase, where counting the signs was not so important any longer. An analysis, interviews had become more important. In fact, I'm not counting signs. I'm giving an example of signs here. Can you see Jawi? This is English in Jawi. This is in Kuala Lumpur, or this is in Malacca. This is in Kelantan, northeast. Actually, in Kelantan and Terengganu, two regions on the east coast, the use of Jawi is compulsory, but like in Brunei, basically, but not in the rest of the peninsula. But still, you can see it here and there. But what was interesting, I think, in this research was these questionnaires I gave to my students, 60 students, I think, 50 students, Malay and Chinese students, and ask them questions about Jawi, just to see what their perception, what their attitudes toward Jawi is. And it's interesting because the answer of the Malay and of the Chinese is quite different. I did the same with my colleague. I selected 20 of my colleagues, both Chinese, Indian, and Malay, and I asked them basically to elaborate on Jawi, what they think about Jawi. And again, the answers were very, very different. I mean, these are the three themes of the, yeah, I don't think I have very much. Anyway, maybe you can have a look at the article. But anyway, basically, the non-Malay were not very enthusiastic, let's say, about the use of Jawi, whereas the Malay were in different ways. Okay, let me close this because I really would like to, before I finish, just introduce the last article because the last article is quite different. It represents maybe a current phase of research in the linguistic landscape. This one, yeah. I'm saying current phase, but really now you can see all sorts of articles. Current phase means that now different methodologies, different aspects of the linguistic landscape, outside, indoors, etc., are being analyzed. yeah, it's not easy to be original at this point with so many articles having been published. But this is an article that, as I was quite different from the previous ones because, yeah, again, I didn't count the size, but I focused on, okay, this first of all is a historical linguistic landscape, which is not so, a little bit unusual because just a few articles had come out before on the historical linguistic landscape, not the current, the present, but of the past. And this is also about fonts, which is also not so common. Only very few articles on the fonts in the linguistic landscape have been published to date. Anyway, I looked at I don't know if probably you have heard about them, the hippies in the 60s and the punks, especially in the 70s in England. Well, I looked at the concert posters that were quite common in the linguistic landscape in those times. And just show you a few examples and then, okay, these are typical hippie posters. These are the concert posters. These are groups and singers, hippie groups, let's say, and singers. This another one. This others. Can you see very colorful? And look at especially here. Look at the font. All round and big letters. Now, just to compare, look at the punk fonts, completely different. Can you see here? These punk groups, Sex Pistols was another famous punk groups. The characters are smaller, square, it's completely different feeling and fewer colors, here just black and white. So this is very interesting because actually I found out that the fonts reflect the ethos, the ideas of these two groups, the juvenile groups. And then I looked at some neuropsychological research on the shape of letters, which is very interesting because basically it confirms what I've just said. Okay, these are more examples. Let me see, where is it? Page 7. Just to show a quote from a, okay, sorry, very important, I was forgetting. It wasn't just my analysis. Actually, I carried out a test among my students of association of ideas. Basically, I gave them a piece of paper with the name of my university in English, University of Malaya, written with a kind of, can you see, a kind of, if I may say, punk font, and another one a kind of hippie font I found online. Not very showy because I didn't want it to be too much, but a little bit and see. So this a little bit squarer, this a little bit rounder, and to see what their reaction was. And look, just this is the hippie font. I got 19 people. They were just writing the words or anything that the font evoked, and 19 said that it was fun. The hippie one, cute, attractive, happy, etc. Look at the other one, the kind of more punk ones. Okay, these are not particularly negative, actually quite positive, clear, serious. But look at this: 8 people wrote serious, 7 wrote scary, 7 wrote messy, 7 wrote strong, mysterious, unclear, dirty, and 3 wrote horror. 3 more boring. Okay, anyway, dangerous, dark. So can you see that the different kind of images that the two fonts evoked? And in fact, this is confirmed by research. Show you this one quotation from an article, a neuropsychological article. In agreement with this hypothesis that the bias towards liking sharp angle objects significantly less than curved objects stem from an elevated perception. So basically, sharp angle objects are liked less by people. Also, Van Lauer wrote that. Sorry, not here. Curve-shaped letters are considered calming, whilst angular-shaped. No, this is him. But anyway, curve-shaped letters are considered calming, whilst angular-shaped letters evoke anxiety. So can you see, anyway, just to conclude, because I think it's about time, just to show you, how different my research has been on the linguistic landscape from the very beginning to now. Actually, I have another article using on the historical linguistic landscape that came out last year. Anyway, just to conclude, I hope I gave you just an idea about what you can research in the linguistic landscape and how the field has evolved in all these phases. And that's it. If you have any questions, please go ahead. Thank you.
All right. So thank you so much, Dr. Colosi, for your insightful presentation. Your researches have truly opened our eyes to the dynamic interaction between language, space, and identity. Okay, so I guess we'll be opening the floor now for any questions. So feel free to ask Dr. Colosi about your inquiries. Okay, you may just drop your questions in our chat box.
Okay, so I have to look at the chat box. And let me close this. Otherwise, we can.
Okay. All right. So we now have our first question from Jamaica Prado. Yes. So good morning, Mr. Colosi. As a researcher, what challenges did you face while recording and classifying signs in Milan and Udine? How did these challenges impact the investigation of local regional languages?
Okay. Actually, I didn't find it particularly difficult. There were not really big challenges. I mean, I could take my pictures. Nobody said. I mean, in my case, nobody said anything. So no, really, it wasn't. At that time, I was also taking notes because I was focusing on minority languages, but I was taking notes. For instance, I wasn't taking pictures of all single shop. So in some case, I took pictures of the shop. I thought they were particularly interesting, but not all of them. So I was taking notes. It was a little bit, so that maybe was a little bit challenging in a way. But on the whole, it was fine. No particular problems. Okay, I can see more. Yeah.
Okay, so keep the questions coming. So we have another question from Mr. Chris Roldan Gonato.
There is a one before, I think. I think Lester Argawanon. Is it the one you mentioned? No?
Let me find the previous one was from Jamaica, so this one is
and then after that there is Lester Argawanon, right?
Lester. I think
Dr. Colucci, I'm Lester from Davao Oriental State University. That one, yeah? Right?
I think he private messaged you because I can't see it here. So, okay, you can just address that question, sir.
Okay, maybe I just since I've got it, I have it here in front of me. So I'm Lester from Davao Oriental State University. I'm interested with the literacy threshold you mentioned. Can you describe it further? Okay, yeah, I just mentioned very briefly. Basically, minority languages. The idea is that if a minority language is not written, is that in some cases if it doesn't have a writing system, or if it has one, if it's not used or just by very few people, basically the tendency, I mean, is that that language won't appear in the linguistic landscape. I won't say this will always apply, but in general. So I devised this idea. There is a threshold under that threshold. The languages that are present in the linguistic repertoire that people use, they speak, etc., but you won't find them in the linguistic landscape. So that was the idea about the threshold, because they don't have a writing system, or if they have, it's not really common, it's not used, etc. If they have a writing system that is used, normally they would appear in the linguistic landscape. Maybe just a few examples. That was a little bit the idea behind it. Okay. Shall I just go on myself, just scroll and read out?
Yes.
What you think? Yeah, it's okay.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes,
My questions, this is from Roldan Gonato. My questions are for the first study you have shared with us. What do you think are the primary motivation for using English prominently in Milan street signage? This more about internationalization, branding, or other motivation? Ah, very good. Yeah, if the signs in English are in the very center, they might be there in some cases for tourists, basically, or people who cannot speak Italian. But I think in general, English is used because it's used quite a lot, not as much as Italian. I think it's more because of the kind of because how can I say, the prestige, the aura, this aura of sophistication of English. I mean, when English appears, a lot of people, not many people in Italy can speak English, but they can recognize English, right? So even if they don't understand, if they see English in general, they would think that there's something good there, because there is English. So the quality of the product or whatever must be good. So English has got a lot of prestige, even for people who don't know English, who are quite a lot in Italy. So I think this is the main motivation. Do you think language regulation should be adjusted to reflect the increasing price of English, or should there be more effort to preserve Italian? Okay, there's no need to promote or preserve Italian because it's very, very common. Italian is everywhere. Even when you go to the cinema, all films are dubbed into Italian. Really, Italian. You would go to bookstores, a lot. There are even a lot of translations of books from English from other. So you can survive perfectly in Italy without knowing any other language but Italian, or maybe the local language. So whether there should be more effort to promote English, maybe. Yeah, I'm not sure about that, but English has become a very important language. I realize, and very useful. But sometimes I'm a bit worried about how do you say, let's call it English imperialism, and the fact that English is everywhere, and has become a world language, but which I don't have anything against. But the thing is, this gives a lot of advantages to English-speaking countries, which is not really fair. In many ways, they produce books, they organize courses, etc. of English. Foreigners go there, pay a lot of money to follow the courses, because English is so prestigious. And if you are an English speaker, you can find job any place in the world. Now you can be a teacher, for instance. That's not a big problem. If you're an academic and you write in English, it's your own language. You don't really need anybody else to edit your article. But we foreigners, I have to do it all the time, even though my English is not bad. But I always ask a native speaker to check it because, of course, it's not going to be perfect. So that's not really fair. In theory, it was mentioned at the beginning, I have a disinterest for constructed languages. In theory, I think the language Esperanto should be the second language of all of people in the world, because Esperanto was built in the 19th century to be a second language, a neutral kind of second language for everybody. But of course, this hasn't happened, and you cannot force it, I guess. Anyway, I would also like to know your opinion on this. How do you react to the increasing price of English? I think in general, people, as I was saying, are fine with the price of English. Actually, most people like it. Maybe a few people may say, no, this shouldn't be too much because Italian is our national language, but very few, I think. Have there been any noticeable shifts in language attitudes or ideologies? English is accepted more and more, but young people can learn English at school, and they can kind of manage with using it. Okay, I go on.
Yes,
This other
sir.
one. Stop me if.
It's okay, sir. I think our participants might want to open their microphones and ask you the questions like
Okay.
verbally. Okay, we
Okay.
have
Can we
Sir
do it now?
Carlitos.
Sorry.
Yeah.
I was just
So to
following.
make it
Okay, let's do
to
so, and
make
then
it more interactive, okay, I
yeah,
think
of course,
Mr. Carlitos can open his microphone and ask
Yeah.
you directly the question.
of course, yeah.
Thank you so much, Miss Mary. Hello, Dr. Colucci.
Hello.
There's one sign that became viral on Facebook. That was during the pandemic. It's in Davao. It was written in Davao Conyo, mixing English and Tagalog. So let me read aloud the statement on the signage. It says, "I-cover mo gud yung bibig and nose mo kung mag-atching ka or ubo." So that mixes English and Tagalog. So I don't know if you have also encountered such signs in your, in doing linguistic landscape research. Do you think this would be effective, especially the signs that convey instructions or warnings?
Yeah. Um, well, I haven't really. This is kind of code mixing, right? I haven't really. I know I've read the other research on this. In my own research, I haven't really found much of it. I must say that. Okay, first of all, if we talk about Italy or Europe, Europe is very pure, has got this kind of puristic tendency. Code switching in general is not seen as positively. I think that is my own perception. Mixing, you don't have to mix. You have to. There's this kind of purism. I think this idea of purism going around. So, but of course, I know code switching, code mixing is very common in many parts of Asia, in Malaysia too, and I know in the Philippines as well. But even in my research here, I haven't really come across, I cannot think at least of. So in the linguistic landscape, languages tend to be kept separated in general. Maybe I noticed something, but I haven't really carried out research on that. Maybe I saw something here and there, but yeah. So it's not common, but I think it's very interesting. Mixing, yeah, as you brought. Actually, I've got your your message here, and mixing English and Tagalog. But anyway, yes, of course, it can be effective. If code switch and mixing is common, why not using it in the linguistic landscape? I think it can be actually people. It would sound a little bit colloquial, maybe friendly, right? Because this is how people speak. So it's yeah, it's good. Okay.
Okay, thank you so much, Dr. Kulumchi. So we have another question here from a fourth year Bailao student. So from Henley Harvey Asueros. Okay, dear, you may also open your microphone to ask Dr. Kulumchi
Yeah,
about your
and then
question.
I'll finish with the one here. Okay.
Good day, Mr. Coluzi. So my question goes like this. As researchers, how can we address issues of subjectivity when interpreting public science?
Mm, yeah, this is a good question. It's a kind of general question, I think, in research, any kind of research, yeah, because yeah, it's not easy to get rid of totally of our subjectivity. We have ideas. Okay, we try as academics to be as objective as possible in different ways through the research methods. But of course, I think a degree of subjectivity in humanities at least is always there. Even though we try, of course, we should try to avoid it. We should try to be as objective as possible. But I think it's very, very difficult. This is my view. I try my best, but I'm sure that my ideas about, for instance, minority languages, I mean, come across quite easily. Yeah, yeah. This is a problem, but it's also something natural in a way. As long as we don't state that our results are true and all the others that are don't reflect our results are wrong. As long as we don't think that, as long as if we accept other points of view and we claim that that these are results of our research with all the in a way it's like a pilot in a way. We try, and then other people maybe can do perfect it or carry it out in a different way. That's fine. I think. Yeah, I hope I answer your question.
Okay, thank you so much. I think that will be our last question for this discussion. So once again, Thank you so much, Dr. Colosi, for sharing your expertise and for contributing to the ongoing dialogue in this fascinating area of linguistic inquiry. And also, we look forward to seeing where your research takes you next. All right, so at this point, we'll now be presenting the certificate of recognition to our dear resource speaker. Okay, so this certificate of recognition is hereby given to Dr. Paolo Colosi for sharing his time and expertise as resource speaker on the topic linguistic landscape, my observations, research, and publication during the first Ilmu International Lecture Series on Applied Linguistics held on September 5, 2024 via Zoom, issued on the 5th day of September 2024 at USAP Davao City, Philippines, signed by our CAS Dean, Dr. Marnie Grace Sonica, and our program head, Sir Sajid S. Ingilan. Okay,
Thank you
thank you
very
so
much.
much and
Thank you.
congratulations. And we would also like to take this opportunity to have a photo with you.
Oh,
So,
okay.
all right, so we would like to request everyone, all our participants, to please open your cameras and our technical staff will be capturing the photos. Okay. Okay, let's start with the first slide. Okay, 3, 2, 1, smile. Okay, next slide. 3, 2, 1, smile. Next slide. 3, 2, 1, smile. And then the next one. 3, 2, 1, smile. All right. So thank you so much, everyone. Okay, I think that ends our um activity for today. I hope that you've learned a lot and you can also apply those insights from our research speaker on your ongoing research studies. Okay, so as we conclude, we would also like to invite Assistant Professor or Dr. Joy Rizanar, our Associate Dean of the College of Arts and Sciences, to deliver our closing remarks. So we have a pre-recorded, I think, video.
To the President of the University of Southeastern Philippines, Dr. Bonifacio G. Gabales Jr., to the Vice President for Academic Affairs, Dr. Jennifer C. Nueva, to the Dean of the College of Arts and Sciences, Dr. Marnie Grace I. Sonico, to the Head of the Institute of Languages and Creative Arts, Mr. Francis N. Rino, to Associate Professor Sajad S. Ingilan, Ms. Rhea Iza T. Paglinawan, and Dr. Angelo Leonard Yu, my fellow program heads from the Language and Literature Department, to the officers and members of the Language Student Society, guests and participants, good morning. First of all, I would like to thank and congratulate the organizers of the first Ilmu for the successful conduct of today's first part of the International Lecture Series on Applied Linguistics. Special mention to the overall chair, Associate Professor Sajad S. Ingilan, who is also the advisor of the LSS, or the Language Student Society, the organization of the English language students of the University of Southeastern Philippines, and at the same time, he's also the program head of the BA in English Language major in Applied Linguistics. Second, I would like to thank our speakers who shared their expertise and valuable time to be able to impart knowledge and updates on recent trends and issues on applied linguistics. I would like to thank Associate Professor Dr. Nasrin Abdillah from the University Technology Mara, Malaysia, Associate Professor Dr. Rodney Jubilado, University of Hawaii at Hilo, Assistant Professor Dr. Christoph Savsky from Prince of Songkhla University, Thailand, and Associate Professor Dr. Paolo Colosi from University Malaya, Malaysia. Finally, I would like to congratulate and challenge all the participants Congratulations for actively participating in today's lecture series. You do not always get to benefit from a lecture packed with renowned scholars from different parts of the world. Not to mention that we did not only had one, but we had 4 of them today. May what you have learned today make you conduct researches that are of practical significance and relevance so that we can indeed contribute to the achievement of the vision of the university, which is to become a premier research university transforming communities in the ASEAN and beyond. Once again, maayong buntag ka natong tanan o daghang salamat.
All right, thank you so much for that, Ma'am Joy. Okay, so as we near to the conclusion of today's webinar, we kindly ask for your valuable feedback to help us improve our future sessions. An evaluation form is available in the chat box, and we would greatly appreciate if you could take a few moments to complete it. Your insights will help us refine our upcoming webinar series, ensuring we continue to provide engaging and enriching experiences for all. Thank you so much for your time and effort. Okay, so as we close this fruitful session, let us bow our heads in a prayer. The closing prayer will be led by Mr. Jacob Harris Urot, a second year AB English language student.
Am I audible, ma'am?
Yes.
So let's bow down our heads and feel the presence of our Lord. In the name of the Father, the Son, the Holy Spirit. Amen. Dear God, as we conclude this webinar, we take a moment to thank you for the knowledge shared by the professors from different countries. Their knowledge should deepen our understanding in language. We ask you for guidance, Lord, as we reflect on what we have learned today. May we apply this knowledge in our studies and build connections that foster collaboration and growth within our academic community. We also pray, Lord, for the well-being of our guests. May they feel appreciated for their contributions and continue to inspire others in this field. Help us also, Lord, to remain open-minded and committed to our pursuit of knowledge as we move forward together. Amen.
Okay. So at this point, we'd like to invite some of our participants for a special buzz session, and the rest of our participants may now go. And yes, thank you so much for your active participation in today's webinar series and for making this event a successful one. Thank you and have a great day ahead.
Thank you.
Bye.
Recording stopped.
Welcome to the Publication Unit, a dynamic arm of the Research and Development Division, striving towards realizing the vision of the university to become a premier research institution. Its main mission is to support and guide faculty researchers in transforming their research into publishable papers with high impact through mentoring